Good evening and welcome to the Town of Corte Madera Planning Commission for Tuesday, March 10th, 2026. Would you please take the roll?
Commissioner Rogers? Commissioner Bushoyer?
Here.
Vice Chair Kenny?
Here.
And Chair Chase?
Here.
And Margaret is absent tonight.
Thank you. Please join me in a salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Great. Okay. But that's not all we're going to do tonight. We have a special visitor tonight, former Commissioner Jim Rizzo. And the staff has put together a lovely memo of appreciation for you. So for those of you who don't know Jim, does anybody not know Jim in the room? Jim I've known since about what, 1990 what? Yeah. Yeah. So wonderful man. So what we have here, before I launch into this, does staff want to add anything to this before I launch into it? All right, great. This is resolution number 26-003. This is a resolution of the Planning Commission of the Town of Corte Madera expressing appreciation to James Rizzo for his invaluable service to the Town of Corte Madera as a member of the Planning Commission. So I'm going to start reading this, and then you're each going to read a couple of sections here. All right, so it starts out, it says, whereas James Rizzo served the Town of Corte Madera with distinction as a member of the Planning Commission from May 19, 2020 to July 31st, 2025, and served as Vice Chair from August 9th, 2022 to July 31st, 2025. And whereas Jim Rizzo's term was set to expire on June 30th, 2025, which would have left the commission with only 4 members. Can't do that. And whereas to support continuity and stability in the commission's operations, James Rizzo graciously agreed to extend his service through the month of July and possibly beyond, therefore ensuring the commission would continue its work without disruption. Absolutely true. So I'm going to pass it over to Daniel here. And if you would start to read right there and take 2.
Whereas James Rizzo approached his duties with professionalism, thoughtfulness, fairness, and integrity, contributing valuable insight and perspective to the commissioner's work that has earned him the respect and trust of fellow commissioners, town staff, applicants, stakeholders, and the broader community. Amen to that. Whereas during his tenure, James Rizzo consistently demonstrated steadfast commitment to the town's planning and development goals, playing a vital role in shaping policies and evaluating projects that ensure growth and change align with the community's values and vision, and resulting in a positive impact on the character and quality of life in Corte Madera.
And whereas Planning Division staff have valued the opportunity to work with James Rizzo, whose insight and collegial spirit have left a lasting impact and whose presence on the commission is truly missed. True. And whereas the Planning Commission wishes to recognize and thank James Rizzo for his dedication, leadership, and public service that has set a standard of excellence and professionalism that will serve as a model for others to follow.
And go ahead, right there. Yeah.
And now, therefore, be it resolved that the Planning Commission of the Town of Corte Madera hereby expresses its sincere appreciation to James Rizzo and commends him for his invaluable contribution to the town and his exemplary service on the Planning Commission.
All right, so then, be it further resolved, this resolution is presented to James Rizzo as a token of the town's gratitude and high regard. I hereby certify that this foregoing resolution was duly and regularly adopted by the Planning Commission of Corte Madera at a regular meeting held on the 10th day of March 2026. So that means this resolution needs a motion and a second.
Second. Oh, the motion.
A motion to adopt.
Oh, there you go. Okay, I can read that. I move the motion to adopt a resolution of appreciation to former Commissioner Vice Chair Jim Rizzo.
Second.
Wonderful. So before we vote, I just want to say that it was always wonderful to have you with us. I looked forward to it and I miss you. So, you have a good life, but I wish you were here, but anyway, so therefore, let's vote.
Oh, do you want to do public comment as well?
Oh, gosh, I forgot. Yes. How could I? Is there public comment on Mr. Rizzo's resolution here in the room? Anyone? Jim?
You have 3 minutes.
I just want to say it was an honor serving with my fellow commissioners, and I learned a tremendous amount from Peter Chase. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Of course, yeah.
And Mr. Rogers, welcome. And I can't say enough about our staff. They're second to none. They're the best I've ever been in front of. Your reports are absolutely thorough, and the knowledge of the planning code and all the state bills that come through and integrating them into our zoning ordinances is phenomenal, and I really appreciate it. And thank you for being patient with me. I have a lot of questions in the process, and thank you very much for the resolution. I really appreciate it. It means a lot.
Absolutely. This is due to staff. So, I think it comes with visiting privileges. So whatever. So let's take a roll call, please.
All right, Commissioner Rogers, Commissioner Beshoyer, Vice Chair Kenny,
Yes.
and Chair Chase.
Of course, yes. So thank you, Jim. Appreciate it. And this belongs to you. You got to come up and grab it. So wonderful. Right. It's really great to be able to do those kind of things and bring a moment of levity and enjoyment and appreciation to the room. So thank you. I really thank staff for putting that together and making sure this happened. It's important. So we're going to move on to other public comment. And at this point in the meeting, we open the dais to anybody who might want to say something about that which is not on tonight's agenda. So if you're here for any other reason than what's on the agenda, you have 3 minutes to speak. And this is Mr. Rizzo's opportunity to say more. Just kidding. Anyway, I don't think anybody in the room is standing up. Is there anyone online that wants to say anything?
No members of the public have raised their hands online, and no emails have been received.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. So then we'll close that part of this meeting tonight. So we have two items on the agenda tonight. The first one is a new hearing for number 2 YOLO Street. This is design review application PL 25-0081 for a 707.9 square foot second story addition and a 58.87 square foot first story addition to the existing single story residence at 2 YOLO Street. So there's a staff member here who's going to make a presentation. That would be Claire Smith.
Yes. Good evening, Chair Chase and members of the commission. Tonight, I will be presenting the design review application for a 707.9 square foot second story addition and a 58.87 square foot first story addition to the existing single story residence at 2 YOLO. The Project site is located within the Marina Village neighborhood and is surrounded by single-family residences similar to the one at 2 Yolo Street. The neighborhood is comprised of both single-story and multi-story homes. The parcel is a 6,390 square foot parcel and is currently developed with a 1,633.8 square foot residence and an attached one-car garage. The residence has a maximum height of 14 feet and 10 inches. The property is a corner lot at the intersection of Echo Avenue and Yolo Street. And although the front door of the residence faces Yolo Street, the municipal code defines the front property line as the shortest street adjacent property line, which in this case is along Echo Avenue. I put a diagram on the screen showing the street side, front, interior side, and rear property lines as are defined by the zoning code. The parcel is zoned R1, medium density residential. This slide shows the required development standards and some existing and proposed conditions. The existing residence is consistent with all R1 zoning district development standards, except for 2 legal nonconforming conditions. The first condition is the location of the garage within the required rear yard setback. And the second is the lack of a second compliant parking space. A parking variance is not required for this project pursuant to the parking ordinance and state law. All the new additions proposed will conform with the required setbacks. You'll also see on the table that the second story proposed will increase the maximum height from the 14 feet 10 inches to 21 feet 8 inches, which is below the 30-foot maximum height limit. Here's the proposed site plan with the second story addition highlighted in gray there. The addition is proposed to maintain an almost 19-foot setback from the north property line where 5 feet is required, a 25-foot setback from the east property line where 25 feet is required, a approximately 20-foot setback from the south property line where 10 feet is required, and an approximately 41-foot setback from the west property line where 15 feet is required. Here's the proposed first floor plan. Modifications on this floor are only proposed on the east side of the residence where 58.87 square feet will be added and the existing primary bedroom will be reconfigured to create a smaller bedroom, a bathroom, a laundry room, and space for the new staircase leading up to the proposed second floor. Adequate space in the garage will be maintained to provide one compliant parking space. The project proposes a new 707.9 square foot second story, which includes a primary suite with an ensuite bathroom and walk-in closet, as well as an office alcove. The proposed south elevation, which fronts Yolo Street, includes 4 new windows on the second floor and 1 enlarged first floor window within the remodeled portion of the lower floor. The overall proposed maximum height, again, is 21 feet 8 inches. The proposed west elevation, which fronts Echo Avenue, includes no modifications on the first floor, but 2 new windows are proposed on the second floor, and they're set back quite a bit from the street frontage. The north elevation, which faces the adjacent neighbor at 29 Echo Avenue, proposes the second story to extend directly above the lower story and incorporates 3 new windows upstairs. These windows are located at the top of the hallway, at the top of the stairwell, and then within the toilet area and the shower area of the primary bathroom. And then at the first floor, the north elevation has 2 windows that are replacing an existing sliding glass door. On the east elevation, which faces the rear yard, the proposed second story will partially extend over the existing garage. And the existing garage is partially located within the required rear yard setback, but the addition will conform with the 25-foot required rear yard setback. The proposed colors and materials consist of fiber cement shingle siding and stucco, painted in Iron Mountain gray, trim painted Chantilly lace white, and asphalt shingle roofing to match the existing roof color. No changes are proposed with the landscaping on site. There's also a physical materials board that I left on the dais for you to review as well. In November of 2025, the applicant attempted to contact neighbors in the immediate vicinity. This included 7 properties on Echo Avenue, Harbor Drive, and Yellow Street. The applicant provided a summary of their neighbor outreach efforts and the feedback received. And as of today, the staff has not been contacted by any neighbors, and no public comments were received during the public noticing period or after the story poles were installed. And on screen, you'll see a map of the neighbors that were contacted by the applicant and those that they were able to meet in person and those that were not available but were left a letter in the mailbox. Staff is recommending approval of this application, and you can find analysis of all design review findings in the draft resolution. I'm available for questions, as well as the applicant team. The property owners are here, and the architect is joining us remotely.
Thank you, Claire. So our next step for the applicant here is that we're going to ask staff questions, and then you guys can make a presentation, and then we'll ask for public comment. So do any of you guys have questions for staff before we get to presentation? Go ahead.
I have no questions, Peter.
Ellery?
Right. So just looking at the staff report and the drawings as well, it looks like there's only a 3% threshold between 47% and 50% when we are required to have the structure to be elevated on the flood zone. So I know the staff report saying that the wet signed affidavits from the owner will be required, but what enforcement mechanism we would have in place, because it's very easy to jump over that threshold, and by the time when the cost for the construction will be discovered that it went higher, the framing probably will be already done. So at what point it will be okay to go back to the owners and say that their house needs to be elevated, in fact, because they already went over?
Yeah, this is enforced by our Public Works Department, and it's a FEMA requirement, so it's taken very seriously. And I think at any time that they would exceed that threshold, I think no matter the inconvenience, they would be required to meet.
And how would that be reinforced?
So it's customary that would happen through the building permit process. So they do need to declare evaluation as part of that. And then if there are iterations or resubmittals, those would also require evaluation. And so at any point the building team receives something new, it does get referred to our public works team, and they do take into account what is being proposed at this time, but there's actually a look back for 5 years. So it's a cumulative 5-year time frame where that threshold could be met. So this one is definitely very close, and the applicants are aware, but it is something that happens through the building permit process and would not come back to you. unless they needed to amend their design review, which in this case, it may require that if they do meet that threshold.
Got it. And then I know that staff is considering recommending for the house to be elevated either way, but would it be okay to have it as a condition of approval considering the recent flood event that we had in Corte Madera?
No, it is a policy that we require that based on that FEMA valuation. So in this case, that would be beyond your authority to be able to require that at this time.
Understood. All right. And there were no any further improvements that were made to the structure in the past 5 years, correct? Are we understanding that correctly?
Yeah, I believe that was already done through Public Works reviewed the planning referral that was sent to them.
Okay. All right. And then my other question was in regards to the neighbor impact. So since there is existing setback variance, right, it's already meeting less of a setback on the yard there on the north side of the building. The staff determined that the shadow study is not necessary, but it's only 18 feet on that setback. What has determined that the shadow study will not be necessary, considering that it's not a typical setback?
On the north side, assuming I'm looking at the same side, the required setback's 5 feet. So it's an interesting lot configuration in that for planning purposes, the front is actually along Echo.
Mm-hmm.
And so the north property line is the interior side property line. So that
I see.
that addition there's a portion they got a design review in 2006 for that addition on that side of the property is complying with setbacks. The part that's not complying is the garage, which our understanding is it was constructed that way in the 50s, and it actually encroaches into the rear yard required setback of 25 feet.
Okay.
And so staff, review the project. It's not based on the height and that 18 feet distance and the way that the sun, arcs through the south. It was determined that the shadows that are cast to the north would probably be less than significant on that property. If there were concerns raised by the neighbor as well, sometimes we will request it for that reason, but we didn't receive any public comments or concerns from the neighbor at 39 Echo, I believe it is.
29 Echo.
20.
Yeah, that's the one that I was concerned about, because since the second story is oriented east-west, it seems like the shadow during the winter months will be impacting the 29 Echo based on the way the map is oriented. And the 29 Echo is the one that did not respond actually to the letters, because the letters were sent in a mailbox and we did not receive the response from it. So I was wondering if the letters from that neighbor specifically will be, the response will be required or not.
No, staff didn't make that
Okay.
as part of our determination, or
Okay.
as part of our recommendation, I guess.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Valerie. Dan, still no questions? All right. I'll come over to you, Andrew. Do you have any questions for staff?
Curious because I haven't been through this process. Evaluation of construction for an addition or remodeling floodplain. The number that's reported here is $486,000. Is that does the homeowner supply the contractor's pricing for that?
Yeah, in cases like this, applicants often provide, and this applicant has provided a detailed construction estimate, which is reviewed by our Public Works Department, and sometimes our building department kind of chimes in on that as well to see is this a good estimate, or do we think this is pretty accurate? Because we don't want them to end up in that situation either of this costs more than we thought we did, and now, you're amending your design review and raising the house at a later time. And so, yeah, they provide a cost estimate. Some people provide more than one, and that's reviewed as part of the process. No, not yet.
Okay. I do not have any questions for staff at this point. So we'll now turn it over to the applicant for their presentation to the commission.
You. Can you hear me okay?
Oh, yeah.
All right, great. Thank you. Thank you for your time this evening. My name is Grant Thomas, and this is my wife, Lisa. We've lived at 2 Yolo Street in Corte Madera for nearly 7 years now. Prior to buying our home, we lived in cities across the country, including Los Angeles, New York, and San Francisco, and hope to eventually find our way back to California and set down roots. We were living in San Francisco when our first child was born. And that life event kicked off our search for a home and a community. We explored multiple communities around the Bay Area and quickly fell in love with Corte Madera. In 2019, we bought this home at 2 Yolo Street. I assumed it would be our starter home and we'd move in a few years. However, nearly 7 years and 2 additional children later, we've grown to love the neighborhood. We've developed a deep connection to the community around us. Our children attend local schools and play in sports leagues and have formed close relationships with our neighbors in the community. At this point, our family of 5 has outgrown the home, and we simply need more space. The goal of this project is to add a bedroom, a bathroom, and a small office to allow our family to live comfortably in the house that we've come to love so much. This project will allow us to stay in the neighborhood that we love, where we've raised our kids and where they've lived their entire lives. And today we call Corte Madera our home. We hope to be here in this community, in this house for many years to come. And with that, happy to answer any questions that you might have for us or Andrew, our architect, who's on the line.
Yeah. Does the architect wish to contribute anything to the presentation?
I just want to mention that we've worked closely with Claire through the process, pre-design through where we are today, and really appreciate her help and guidance through this process.
Okay. Well, thank you. That's sort of a minimal approach here. So you you can say more if you'd like. But since you're standing there, we'll ask the commissioners if they have any questions for you. So I'll start again with Valerie and see if she wants to ask you something.
Well, I have just a question, like considering that you guys are making it your forever home and you're making a significant investment into the home, have you seriously evaluated the need to actually raise above the floodplain? Because it is an issue. If you have seen last year or this year what has happened in the beginning of the year with the flood. So it kind of makes sense. And 47% is a very close tie. You will probably run into the issue of construction costs driving higher, especially with new tariffs right now and with other things. So I'm just curious if you have considered that very carefully and the reason why you wouldn't go that route.
Yes. So a couple things. We have considered it. We've discussed it with contractors and engineers. And the reality of the situation is the cost would overrun our budget. I mean, we're on a very tight budget to achieve what we're trying to. We had to get as creative as possible with Andrew. And the reality is if we did raise the home, we couldn't do the project. That's I guess step one. Step two is the house has been raised, actually. Not, beyond the FEMA flood zone, but I've crawled around under the house myself. It has been raised. There have been pylons put throughout, and it stands substantially above the road and above street level. We've had an elevation certificate done as part of our flood insurance through FEMA. That shows we actually sit significantly higher than most lots in the neighborhood. And during the recent flooding a couple months ago, which from what we've heard is some of the worst in decades in the neighborhood, there was no water near our property line. Not even standing water in the street in front of our home. So
Okay.
if costs were no issue, we'd be happy to raise it. But the reality is that it is.
Understood. Well, thank you for answering that. And then I just have a question to Andrew, your architect, I guess. We've noticed that you're doing concrete shingles on one of the sides, and that transitions into stucco. Do you have a detail for that as well? Because it seems like it's going to be in the same plane as the stucco and probably the same color, but there definitely will be a material transition there. Is it because you're proposing the stucco on the first floor and then you're doing the concrete shingles on their second floor?
Yeah, we're continuing the existing condition of the house as built, where it does have the stucco band at the base and then existing shingle above that. So we're not altering anything on the ground level as far as the exterior finishes, and we're just continuing the shingle up for the second floor. So you'll see that between the existing stucco and the existing shingles, there's a belly band around the house, which
The most interesting part disappeared.
Oh, did we lose him?
You got muted somehow. We lost your voice.
It's still showing it's, oh, am I connected now?
Okay, there you.
I'll step in for Andrew until he gets his mic back. But really what we were trying to do was keep the exact same existing look, existing materials, literally the exact same colors of the home, and just take the second floor and make it a continuation of the first floor. So it's the same fiber cement siding, and it'll be the same color and trim as the
So
existing.
there will be no transition between the stucco. It seems like you're changing the material. So
No, so on the first floor, there's stucco around the base. It probably goes up 4 feet, and then it transitions to fiber cement siding, and that is, you know, from about waist high up on the first floor, and we're just continuing that on the second floor. So it
we'll
will
have
all,
like a little detail transitioning the material, or it will be just touching. Like
well, there'll be a roof, right? I mean, it'll be the roof in
Oh,
between.
there. Okay, it goes there through that. Okay, that's all. Thank you.
I don't know if I'm connected yet, but there are existing photos in the file here of the house and what that detail is, and that there is a belly band around the perimeter of the house between the stucco base and the shingle siding, which will be maintained.
All right, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Valerie. Daniel, do you have any questions?
No questions.
Okay. And over to you, Andrew.
I like the design. I think it's fine.
I like the design. I think it's fine. I understand the program and why you want to do this. I also understand the budget constraints and why you're not able to elevate the house. Again, I'm not quite sure how the whole process works, but I would not want you to get halfway into the project and then find out that there's a cost overrun, which would prompt you to have to elevate the house. I think that would be kind of a nightmare for you. So that's my only concern. I think that if I'm breaking down the square footage cost of your construction, it's pretty modest based on my experience for a vertical addition. And there hasn't yet been structural work, which is something, a structural plan, which obviously has a lot to do with informing the construction cost. So,
Well, there have been structural designs and structural plans done.
it's just not in our packet.
Yeah, it's not in the packet.
I'm glad to hear that, actually. Okay.
Yeah, it's done. We've had a geological engineer come out and do a soil sample, do a 30-foot core sample to figure out exactly what we're going to need from a foundation perspective. We've had a structural engineer come in and figure out everything we need to do with shear walls, where we're going to reinforce existing. It's going to be a new monolithic slab that's tied into the existing, effectively a float slab, and all the engineering work has been done. That's all baked into the cost. And our general contractor, he's very clear on the situation.
He's local, hopefully. Okay, thank you. That helps.
Thank you, Andrew. Yeah, in other words, he doesn't go over budget. End of story, right?
That's right. Yes.
So, but I think just for the record, and the planning folks might want to contribute to this, is that you write that certificate that says this is what our cost is. And the process is such that only if there's a change in design that goes before planning or building, does that raise the cost at that point. And you're clearly motivated not to have that happen. So, that's the only way it occurs, is that you have to take it to the department. And that's the only time it ever happens, right? Is that correct? Yeah, okay. So they're under no duty to say, well, it's costing more than we thought. No, it's if it goes before planning and building that it then elevates the cost.
That's
Yeah, okay. Great, all right. Thank you. With nothing else from you to add, we'll see if there's anyone who wants to make public comment on this. So,
Great.
thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay, so I don't think anyone in the room is going to comment on this. So is there anybody online that would like to comment on this?
There are no hands raised online,
Okay,
and no emails have been sent during the meeting regarding this item.
thank you very much. Okay, so then we're going to take it back here to the dais and we'll start with comments and see where we stand. So again, with you, Valerie, what's your approach to this project?
Like the design, I understand the space. I think owners are making a good investment. My only concern is with the flood plain, just because it is a significant investment, and considering all of our initiatives here for sustainable development, I feel like this is where I'm just not sure how we should be proceed. I understand the budget constraints. I totally get it. It's very difficult on homeowners to proceed with the requirement. So I feel like, I don't know if it's a separate discussion on how we evaluate these projects, because here it's a classic example of we having a family that wants to expand and wants to have more space, but yet the elevation of the house above the floodplain cost too much.
Right. So that's out of our purview at the moment, certainly, but I appreciate that comment, and I'm sure staff takes that to provide more clarity on the process for how this functions. Okay, so it sounds like that aside, you could make the findings for the budget.
For sure.
Okay.
Yes.
Mr. Kenny.
Yeah, I'll start with the floodplain issue because that seems to be the elephant in the room. And I was going to ask you whether you had flooding issues there in this last major flood. And so I think that's, for me, reassuring that there's some gap there, some room. I think I agree with the staff's conclusions, both to the general plan and the design review findings around views and sunshade and so forth. So I could support this application.
Good. Okay. Well, thank you for that. And Andrew.
Yeah, for reasons I already mentioned, I do support this project. I think it makes sense. I'm glad that you're staying in the neighborhood and able to grow your family there. My only comment is that not a requirement by any means, but just a recommendation to consider solar panels on your south-facing roof, if possible, if you have any funds left over at the end of the project, or in the future. Yeah, 5 years, right?
Right. So they're required to make it solar ready, as you say, but the investment. As I drove around, I look at the homes that have the second story, and the map that staff generated shows the proliferation of second stories. There are not that many on Yolo Street over there. Or I'm sorry, Echo Avenue. There's not that many on Echo, but you go back to the east and there's more over there. But it looks fine. It fits in the neighborhood. The neighbor to the east, I was concerned about, but the view blockage, but it's not. And they have a mammoth row of trees there on their property. So they're not interested in looking toward your property in the least. And there was a crack in the fence that allowed me to see their hot tub and everything going on in the backyard. So they have their own playground and they want to keep it private. So that's clear. And it's a lovely little neighborhood. So I can certainly make the findings for this. I think it's a good project. It's good for you. It's good for the town. So with that said, I would ask if someone will make a motion for the approval of this resolution.
I make a motion to to consider in the matter of design review application PL 25-0081 for 707.9 square foot second story addition and a 58.87 square foot first story addition to the existing single family residence at 2 Yellow Street.
All right. A second.
Second.
Thank you. All right. Let's take a roll call.
Commissioner Rogers,
Yes.
Commissioner Bushoyer,
Yes.
Vice Chair Kenny,
Yes.
and Chair Chase,
Yes.
and Commissioner Bandel is absent.
And you will read for us.
Following action by the Planning Commission at a public hearing or meeting, any decision of the Planning Commission may be appealed to the Town Council within 10 calendar days. Appeal forms are available at the Planning Department, Corte Madera Town Hall, or you're welcome to download a PDF online. A $1,500 filing fee is required.
Thank you very much. All right. Best of luck to you folks. It's great. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, this is great. Let's move on to the second item tonight. This is a business item. It's a preliminary review of an application for design review permit amendment, setback variance, and parking variance in order to expand the existing Marinjo's restaurant by 97 square feet with no additional seat count. So, we heard this before, but I'll let Amy tell us all about it here.
Yes, thank you so much, Chair Chase. I will be presenting this item tonight. This is Claire's project, but I will say we are taking this project a little bit out of turn. We do have a lot of applications and we take them in sequence depending on when they are complete. And we do prioritize certain types of projects such as new housing units by policy, but by practice, we also try to facilitate and streamline our business community as well. So this is part of that. So we're taking this out of turn. So I'll be presenting this tonight with Claire's support as well. So this is a somewhat of a study session preliminary review related to Marinjo's. Next slide, please. So you'll probably remember that you saw this project back in September. You all did entitle a design review application, use permit, and variance for the modifications of that existing restaurant. And they did apply for a building permit concurrently. So it was very shortly after your action that they discovered an issue with the building permit. And we'll talk a little bit more about it, but basically they just needed a few more inches of egress within the structure itself to be able to maintain their existing seat count. And to remedy that, they're proposing to bump out the building very slightly, which constitutes about 97 square feet. And so they did apply very recently, just a few weeks ago, and we wanted to be able to facilitate the conversation about this amendment with you in order to know how to move forward. Next slide, please. So the small expansion that they're talking about is 97 square feet. It's really just the very front of the restaurant. And there will be no addition in the amount of seats. So this is really just to accommodate ADA and building permit comments. So it really presented a little bit of a bureaucratic quagmire that this little expansion necessitated this amendment, but it also requires them to look at parking. Whereas the project that you saw last time, we really had no authority to really look into the parking in an in-depth fashion because it didn't trigger a parking variance. This small amount of floor area that's being increased by triggers the review of parking. So even though there's no additional seat count inside the restaurant, because of this 97 square feet, we're going to need to come back and talk about a variance finding related to parking, and then another building variance. And so that's really the amendment that we're looking at. And because it is so peculiar and there's a few more layers to this, we wanted to have a preliminary discussion with you just to see if it's if our strategies are really going to get to a point where it's approvable or if we need to do more work on this. Next slide, please. So there is the parking variance. The addition will actually encroach into the rear setback very, very slightly, about 81 square feet of it. So that is why there is an amendment also for an additional variance. And ironically, with this site, it is the rear setback. Next slide, please. And just a reminder of the site and how constrained it is. You've seen this slide previously, but this is looking at the property setbacks. So obviously, there's not much they can do without requiring a variance on the property. This is existing. It was built in the 50s, I think 54, and has been operating as a restaurant until this last year or two. Next slide, please. So the issue with parking is really also constrained. During your last conversation and resolution around Marinjo's, you did require a couple extra conditions related to parking. So I'll just remind you that they are required to do a parking plan, and they are also required to do a deed restriction to make sure the second lot is restricted parking related to Marinjo's. So of course, though they will be required to do those things regardless of this amendment, but they will be required before building permit issuance. So this is coming from their parking demand analysis, but this is the main parking lot showing the actual spaces, and then we can come back to these later, but the red is actually showing the potential stacking as it relates to valet, which is one of their strategies that they're proposing. Next slide, please. And then this is the overflow lot, the second lot, showing again the number of spaces and the potential overflow stacking potential with the valet. Next slide, please. And so just taking a look at the parking requirements, there are 46 parking spots on both sites together. If this restaurant were to be permitted today as is, it would require 77. And with this 97 square feet, it would require 79 spots. And I will say the way that our parking regulations have been interpreted over time is that we look at the total amount of square footage and then the additional space for every 3 employees as a total. We did really look at this to figure out, okay, if we're just adding 97 square feet, that's 2 spots. Can we figure out how to make a recommendation where only 2 additional spots are required? But really our practice is to look at the whole site, the whole use. And in this case, we would be trying to accommodate 79 parking places. So a shortfall of 33 parking spaces. Next slide, please. So the area of code that really gives us problems is this parking variance finding. This is in our code. It's very specific to Corte Madera. It has given us a lot of challenges with not just this project, but many others, because we have a lot of existing commercial that is underparked. A lot of the properties are just fixed, and there's too many constraints to be able to add more parking. So it creates a challenge when we try to re-tenant buildings with uses that are appropriate for the site, but the parking ratios do not accommodate. And this project alone already couldn't accommodate and added that second property of parking, which is extremely rare that you'd have a commercial property with a vacant property next door that can be utilized for parking. So they've really maximized their opportunity within this very constrained area. Next slide, please. So the other layer of complication is this area of code is something that we had already flagged for amendment as part of our commercial code modernization project. This is a policy effort that we've talked to you about previously. It is meant to really update comprehensively our commercial code, looking at the uses, looking at how the conditional use permit occurs and those thresholds, and really trying to make things more flexible, more business friendly. And parking is a big component of that. We're already hoping to add more flexibility by working on this section around findings, working on the ratios of parking, and adding potential strategies. Instead of having to get a variance, applicants may be able to do a variety of things that we are actually suggesting with this project. So this policy project is moving through the process right now. You'll be hearing this as a study session at your next meeting, which is why we streamlined this application, because we have such stacked agendas coming up for you. So in a way, we are going to be alleviating this code section, but it will not be done until late summer. So we are hoping to be able to find some strategies that will help with the existing findings that we have in the code as it reads today. Next slide, please. So the applicant was really challenged by this as well. So we've all on their team and our team have been trying to figure out a way forward to be able to facilitate this 97 square feet with no new seat count. And so they did a parking demand analysis. Their traffic engineer is here tonight. And the analysis is in your packet, and a lot of it is very traditional requirements as far as traffic engineer. They look at the ITE manual on the use and how many parking spots would be required. There was a review of safety in the area. And the thing that we want to focus on are some of these strategies to reduce the parking demand. That's really key here, because there is absolutely no way to add more parking to either of these two properties. So the parking demand analysis made some suggestions, and then staff, we provided a few suggestions as well. So of their suggestions, they talked about the valet parking. Previously, the valet parking was only offered in the lower lot, so the actual restaurant itself. And they are proposing to use the upper and lower lots for valet. So that allows to have an additional stacking of vehicles to be able to maximize the cement, basically. And then they also proposed an employee parking management program. The way it is written requires that the employees would park off-site. And so that's not something as staff we could recommend, because our code does allow does require that the commercial business use their existing site to maintain their existing parking for employees. And then also bicycle parking for both the customers on a short-term basis and then employees for a long-term basis. And then we're just offering some other different strategies that we've seen in other jurisdictions. Then this is really in the framework of traffic or demand management. There's a whole bunch of different strategies depending on what you're trying to do to try to get people to shift their mode from a single occupancy vehicle to bike, pedestrian, carpool, some other method to reduce that kind of parking demand. So other strategies that could be considered, and I will say the applicant team has not said whether they go for these or not. These are just from staff perspective, but a very classic method would be to provide transit subsidies or reimbursements for employees. We do that here for our staff. Offer stipends or rewards for employees who use other modes of transportation, encourage employee carpooling, rideshare incentives. There could be the potential to identify a temporary spot. You see restaurants do this sometimes for the online pickup ordering, or some of the DoorDash and other businesses that come and go. And then also to consider customer rideshare discounts. And you'll see in the analysis that Fridays and Saturdays are the most impacted nights. And interestingly, Fridays more so than Saturdays. So we're really looking to figure out how do we offset that parking demand for those key hours on the Friday and Saturday nights. Next slide, please. So really what we're looking for is your feedback on if these strategies would be helpful to be able to make those findings. If not, is there something more that we could be looking into? I know this puts you in a kind of a different spot than you're used to. We do preliminary design review conversations, but we haven't really done anything like this. So your feedback is really appreciated on this. I will say, as always, try not to note how you would vote in the future. This is really just a preliminary discussion on the package of what they're proposing and what may help alleviate the parking situation. Because again, the only reason we're talking about a parking variance is because 97 square feet, no addition in seat count. And then I will note that Commissioner Kenny asked some questions and Claire did send a response. So I want to make sure that you all received that. But we really appreciate that you provided these questions in advance. And there was a question about the seat count and what it was previously and what it is as proposed. The applicants noted that the existing seat count was 189, and that's one less seat count than what's proposed right now. And then there was also a question about safety on Casa Buena Drive. And Claire had a conversation with the engineer who worked on that project. There were recent improvements done through a complete streets program. And really that whole project was to alleviate a lot of the safety issues. But the questions, but in particular about 3-point turns and U-turns, wasn't something that was really anticipated as part of that project. That project is really looking at bike and pedestrian access and making sure that's safer. And and then there was also a question about the concrete block retaining wall in the upper parking lot. And the applicant team did say they were willing to work on correcting anything that looked unsafe, including that wall. So they may be able to comment more on that. So with that, I will stop my presentation and we're available for questions. We also have the traffic engineer and the architect for the project here tonight.
Thank you. Okay. So from staff, that's all you've got to say at the moment. But we're going to ask you some questions about this. Then we'll have the applicant talk to us for a minute at their whatever they want to say. And then we'll talk about it and ask you more questions or give you feedback. So to my left, I'm going to start with Andrew and see if he has any questions for staff regarding this presentation you've just made.
I just have a question about process. We are to articulate whether we're generally in favor of the alternative methods to get them there, or what? I'm confused about what the outcome of this should be with us.
Yeah, so I think we're looking for feedback on what would help be able to make the findings or make the project application more complete for you to be able to consider how you would see this in the future.
Got it. Because I'm in favor of all those alternatives that were listed. I think they all make sense.
Great. So I
I
think,
mean, some are obviously easier to implement than others, but
yeah.
I think collectively it's all good.
Yeah, and I think the findings, and we can put those up if you need it again. They're a little tricky. They're not worded well, and that's why we want to work on them in general. But it does talk about safety, so we want to make sure that whatever's changing with the use in the restaurant, that it's not increasing parking in a way that would require additional enforcement or that we couldn't enforce. And then also there's not creating a safety hazard and that it's not going to interfere with the free flow of traffic on the public streets. So those are really the areas where we want to make sure that we have enough strategies in place to really alleviate what the commission will have to review in the future.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll start over here with Valerie and see if she has any questions for staff.
I do have few. In regards to kind of realistic timeline for the modernization, the code modernization project, is there do you foresee that there could be a simpler path to this parking solution once we do undergo this? And would it be worth for the applicant to wait until that happens before asking all of these variances?
Yeah, that's a fair question. When the applicant ran into this problem last October, we noted we had this process moving. I think our consultant RFP was out at that time, so very early. But anytime you touch the code, we do it comprehensively, very thoroughly, and it takes at least 6 months. So at this point in time, we're coming to you all this month with a study session. It'll take some time to really round out that outreach and draft the actual policy. So we do anticipate summer, potentially June, July for Planning Commission, and then potentially August for council. And then it would go into effect 30 days after that. So it's actually a very long time before the code would it be in effect. And just talking with the owner of this property and the applicant team, we really streamlined the first time it came to your commission because we knew that it's very expensive to reopen a restaurant. We are doing our best to keep our business community thriving, and absolutely with vacant properties, we want to make sure we're not hindering anything moving forward. So and they ran their building permit process and planning process concurrently, which isn't done often. There's a risk to that. So I think, on both sides, we've been trying to do what we can.
Mhm.
So I don't know if they are going to be up for waiting until this code is in place. Their building permit is just stuck in process until we get through this. So I think that's something you may want to ask the applicant.
Understood. All right. And then the other question is just a little bit more concrete. It looks like the parking occupancy surveys were done when the restaurant was not occupied. So I was wondering if a staff would be requiring to provide additional surveys once the restaurant is going to be occupied, because it seems like, it's just a forecast, right? And it seems like what I've noted is that today, or at the time of the survey, the off-street parking is 69% occupied on Friday nights, and it seems like this is the parking spots that the restaurant is relying on the peak hours. Besides their valet parking initiatives and all of the other things. So it seems like there is already a high demand on the off-street parking in that particular area, which leaves us only at 30% occupancy, perhaps. And then they're forecasting the 80 vehicles there, but it could be more. So would you guys require additional surveys to evaluate that, or reevaluate, revisit how that thing is operated in case if there is traffic congestion in that corner?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think this is why it's a difficult quagmire, because we know there have been problems with parking in the past. In the iteration of Marin Joe's that we know, this is a very constrained spot in town. And anytime a new restaurant opens, it will be overrun. And who knows how long that will continue, even with Super Duper, it just happens when something is new and reopening. There is a condition that you previously required that requires a parking plan. We do monitor parking problems, and we'll work with the applicant team to alleviate issues if there are any. I think requiring a parking study after it's open may be problematic, because the recourse to that is difficult if they're already entitled, already open. So I think these strategies are the things that we're pointing to that can be morphed on and changed on an ongoing basis to say, all right, how many employees are actually biking to work or using public transportation? Were those strategies enough to get them to shift their mode? Are there new programs that can be instituted for customers? How's the valet operating? Is it the right valet company that's stacking them in the way that you need them to? So again, this is a very constrained site. So if it wasn't Marin Joe's reopening and another restaurant coming in, they would most likely have the same issue because there's a finite amount of parking that can occur. And you don't want to limit the actual building itself more than what it's already limited to. So that's why it's a little bit of an economic challenge to figure out how do we facilitate this, but put enough measures in place that if there is a safety issue, we're able to take care of it, we're able to monitor it, and just work with the applicant team on these various measures to make sure we get the sweet spot where it's not going to create a parking issue that's as bad or worse as it was previously.
Yeah, I understand. And it's an interesting dilemma because as a town who's moving towards sustainable development, I feel like we don't want to add more parking, but at the same time, it is a retail restaurant and it's a interesting corner because it's not easily accessible by pedestrian walk passes. And what I'm concerned the most is that particular area is where bicycles go down, right? And they go with increased speed, and a lot of cars will be backing up in that area. So it's just safety concern for sure that will, it's already there. One of the things that I was thinking, and I'm not sure how that can be initiated, is in one of the also, I guess I can tie it into the voluntary measures that the staff suggested, the carpooling and all of the other things. But perhaps we can somehow make it mandatory for that specific reason. Like if the restaurant actually purchases transportation credits for their staff and so forth. So that will alleviate that off-street parking needs. But also another thing that I was thinking is there are a couple of the commercial, I believe like C3 zone properties right next to it, and they're operating during day hours. So the time when the restaurant will be at the peak hours, those properties already off business. So perhaps restaurant can make a partnership with these commercial properties and they can rent their parking spot after hours. I feel like that would just add a lot of parking spots to them. And this way they're sharing someone else's property and it's a little bit more sustainable that way.
Yeah, that may have been how that second lot kind of gelled over time. Perhaps they were using it passively. But I think that is something to ask the applicant if they're willing to talk with the neighboring properties. There are a few there, and I see what you're saying about the timing of when they're used. But that really is up to the applicant team. Any of the strategies that would be required as we would move a recommendation forward, they would be mandatory. But even with transit passes, someone's got to use it. So I think we'd want to monitor it to see, are they actually being used? Is it useful? Because generally you have like a half-mile walk shed from transit, and this is right outside a half-mile from these and spots. So, and if you're working late night in a restaurant, is there going to be a bus late night? We're not incredibly transit rich here. So, so that one, even on it by itself, is challenging, but it's a very classic measure that's usually added. It's an expensive measure. But sometimes you have enough of those in one area, it will actually prompt the transit service to provide more service if they know that there's a node that needs more service. So we're always coordinating with Marin Transit specifically to see what new routes and changes are happening. But sometimes it's off kilter from where the need is, just depending on timing.
Would we be able to require like a carpooling spots from the owner, for instance, for their staff? For instance, if we devote 2 parking spots for the carpools only?
You could. I think that might be a question for the traffic engineer because I would hate to restrict spots that may go unused if the shifts don't align where the 2 people who want a carpool are coming and going at the same time. For instance, I think restaurant life is a little more challenging than just like an office type situation.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you. I have no further questions.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Kenny, I'm sure you have some questions for staff.
Yeah. Are there other businesses, and what businesses are they that are currently using some of these mitigation strategies?
I know we use it here for our town staff, a couple of these strategies, but other than that, I don't think we've required any of these strategies. I think this is what we're looking at with our code update is to kind of map out a menu of strategies that we can offer when an area is underparked. But maybe the staff can chime in if they can think of anything, but I don't know of any in recent history. Yeah, parking variances are rare.
Okay. Let's say that when they come back, the commission wanted to add some conditions relative to the parking. How, you may have answered this, but I'll ask it anyway. How are we going to monitor that? And you raised the question, like, just because someone gets a pass doesn't mean they're going to use it, right? So how do we establish something that gives us the ability to make corrections later? And maybe one or two strategies isn't working, but one is, and they could expand it. I mean, how does it actually work once this thing is up and operating?
Well, I will say, I mean, we're lucky we're a small town, so we work with our businesses on an ongoing basis. And you do already have a condition in the first entitlement requiring a parking plan. And as part of that, we would periodically check in to make sure it's working. And if we did receive complaints around parking or unsafe turning movements or things from police department or code enforcement, that would require us to have a more in-depth conversation about the parking plan, what's not working, what can we do differently. And so it would be a matter of trusting staff and writing the condition in a way that we're required to enforce and to review potentially annually or at some cyclical point in time.
So that, if I understand what you're saying, if it turns out there's, I guess, how do we, in any condition we put in there, how do we give then staff the authority to enforce this once the restaurant's operating?
So the enforcement would be through that parking plan and making changes to get to a place where it's working for the town and working for the business. So I think what I'm saying is, I mean, there'd be no way I would see your commission or us at staff saying if parking becomes a problem, we would close the business. That would be very extreme. So I think we would just continue to work with them to alleviate the issues. I know the applicant team wouldn't want any safety issues. They certainly don't want to have a situation where their patrons can't park. So we would be working collaboratively with them to make sure there's some way to make it work out.
Okay, thanks.
I think what in part you may be asking, Dan, is about what's the mechanism. So it's either code enforcement officer or complaint driven. So it's one of those. Staff does not themselves go check on it. There's no study that says, are you meeting these objectives in some way? Like, and the only way to do that is by code enforcement out there in the field or complaint.
Yes, we will hear about it. We have heard about issues at this site. So
Yeah. Okay. Before we hear from the applicant, I'm sorry, what?
Did Andy have any questions?
He did start, but yeah.
Okay.
We're at a point here where the roadmap is set, the property is set. It has no further expansion capacity here in any way. That's what it is. So the strategy is to find a way to use that capacity in a more effective manner. That's what you're trying to do. In your future updates to the code, we'll say, here's ways to do that. Here's the flexibility. So if you could pull up that findings for a second. The first part there, A, neither present nor anticipated future traffic volumes generated by the use of the site or uses of the site in the vicinity reasonably require strict or literal interpretation and enforcement of the specified regulation. Could the attorney please explain this? I mean, it needs to be simplified in a way that I'm not quite sure I understand that sentence. Is there any way that you could say,
My mic, yes.
Let's go. I think this is exemplary of why staff is asking for some guidance here because it is not the most clearly written statute. I think if I were to rephrase this in a simple text for you all, what it's asking you to make a finding is if the proposed use is going to require you to have to interpret the statute in order to make a finding. Is that fair?
good God Almighty? All right, okay. All right.
That was oversimplifying it.
So this is one of your jobs is to
Yes,
clear it
I'm-
up, right?
Trying to think of a better way to phrase that.
And if you're going to do that in this upcoming thing, you have to say, how do we rebuild that statement? Or do you just,
Yes. So I am not integral in the current code enforcement. I know we have
Yeah.
consultants that are working on that. So I don't have I have not been privy to
yeah,
multiple revisions of this or interpretation, but trying to digest it in the most simplest term for you now as currently written, my personal interpretation would be what it's asking is if the board, excuse me, if the proposed use by the applicant requires the board to make a either strict or literal interpretation of the specified regulation. So are you being required to make an interpretation, whether it's strict or broad? Is it giving you too much discretion in your interpretation of the statute in order to approve this application?
okay. That makes a little more sense. Yes. All right. And B and C strike me as being inapplicable here, but in this case, because we're not, it's not a part of the configuration there. The off-street parking is not a part of the calculation here.
Currently correct.
And so even though I count like 19, 20 spaces on the street in the vicinity, that's not part of the calculation. You brought it up a moment ago about those spaces, right? They're just, you can't count them directly. It's in the report, but you can't say part of the parking use is off-street parking.
Right. And if you're finding that the proposed use would in fact result in off-street parking as a result of the approval, then you wouldn't be able to make the finding.
Okay.
Okay.
So I read it a little differently because even if there's off-street parking in the public spots, although we don't really want the project to be assuming that it can alleviate the parking issue, even if there were overflow parking, it wouldn't interfere with the free flow of traffic on the streets.
Okay.
So I think that's where I went when I read it, of perhaps there would be overflow. There likely would be. The project itself is not trying to accommodate with the overflow parking, and it would not interfere with the free flow of traffic.
Okay. Thank you. I think the next question I have was the code section that you're talking about. You said you would develop a strategy for flexibility. What does that look like? What does that sound like when you say that?
So we're actually working on this right now, just kind of batting ideas around of what our consultant thinks might work. But the idea is that we don't really require the parking variance findings to come to, for instance, the commission, that we have some ability to do things at the administrative level. And that may be a certain threshold for being able to exceed the parking ratios. But then if you exceed that threshold, then there's certain things that can be incorporated into the project. So certain standards that probably emulate some of these strategies that we can require as part of the project approval administratively.
Got it. Okay. All right. That's helpful. So in your presentation, you've basically put in front of us a number of options here, and you're really asking to say, what other options can we suggest?
Yes, or are these options within the realm of possibility that may help alleviate any issues you may have with the findings? Knowing what you know about the site and the constraints.
All right. Thank you. Would the applicant like to make some presentation
May I
here?
ask one more
Oh,
question
sure,
from
yes.
staff? Are there any other projects that have a similar situation in case if you do grant the variance to this parking that they would use this as a precedence?
That's a great question. Not that we know of. As Claire mentioned, parking variances are extremely rare for commercial properties. And yeah, there's none that I know of. And even if this were to set precedent, I think at staff level, we would be comfortable with that because we know there are other constrained sites that really require flexibility to be able to re-tenant.
Okay, thank you.
All right, gentlemen, who would like to speak?
Yeah, I watched. Chris Kalos, Cass Calder Smith. I've stood in front of most of you before. Last time this project went through. You know, I was really clear on what I wanted to talk about tonight coming in, but given this discussion, it really comes down to this, you know, finding about parking, which is just so divorced from some design idea or building configuration. It's just sort of cut and dry from why we're here, which is there's you know, accessible means of egress or exit from a building, which requires a certain distance between aisles of booths or seats, which this restaurant wasn't designed for in its original iteration, and sort of you know, would make us knock out 10 full seats, prime seats for the restaurant. And the financial impact of that is great enough when you take per seat dollar amount and, you know, put that in what that produces in a year and the viability of sort of this restaurant, which is a tough business to be in anyway. And I can I don't know if Chris is here, but Chris Henry, the owner, is here, and I will let him speak to any kind of you know, financial considerations or things that he's concerned about. But as the architect, just to sort of, I think you guys are very familiar with the situation, but what I can speak to is what this means architecturally. And so you see this blue line here, which is the convergence of our front and rear yard setback, which leaves pretty much no buildable space on this lot. So we were not proposing any kind of a real addition previously, but given these exiting widths, we really needed these two aisles in the main dining room to expand and to try to retain our seat count for well, and so now what we're looking at is the approved resolution from before. And so we had I think 74 seats just sort of in this main dining room in this one. And then if we go to the next slide, we looked at what could we get providing the full exit width, and it really thinned up this center aisle of seats, and it knocked out 10 seats from our dining room. And so the next slide is the proposed adjustment of this wall puts us back at that seat count, and you can kind of see, you know, one question here was, you know, could we support encroaching into the rear yard? And it seems kind of common sense that the findings could kind of write themselves, and that the rear yard setback for C3 is meant to create adequate light and air for residential properties that border that rear yard. Any other C3 that doesn't have a residential zone, up against it, has no rear yard setback. So that would be gone in our, case. But we have this residential area, but it's the front of our restaurant, which is encroaching into that rear yard. So it is no impact on any light and air of the residential district behind it. So that one seems easy, but the parking variance is one where we're willing to do everything we can. But that one also seems doable. This restaurant was approvable in this case as it sits, with a certain seat count. And the 30 inches that we're moving that wall is not adding any seat count. It's just making the project safer. And so it's not going to increase traffic volume. It's not increasing the traffic volume from what it was approved at before. And so I think the findings are asking you if the new use is going to create a safety issue beyond what was there, and it's not. So, however, we do want efficient circulation. That's better for everybody. That's better for the business. It's better for the city. That's better for everybody. So we want efficient circulation. So we did look at, and we hired a traffic engineer to look at, how we can do that and what the existing condition is. So I can I've sort of laid out, how many, seats this would knock out, and I can let Chris, the owner, speak to, what this means to his intentions. Or
Okay, there he is.
Okay, well, good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for being here. Wanted to thank Amy and Claire for putting this presentation together. I think both of you have done a nice job, and we appreciate working with you to find a reasonable solution to this problem. I feel like I'm kind of sort of caught in a catch-22 here. We're not asking for really anything other than just to scoot a wall out a little bit to accomplish the ADA requirements, the building requirements for life safety. And we want to bring the building up to today's codes. But we also, we can't afford to have, 10 to 12 prime seats taken out. The restaurant business is tough enough. And then when you start taking revenue away, it just makes it next to impossible. So we really need to come to some kind of a conclusion, hopefully sooner rather than later. We want to get back to cooking good food and having people visit the restaurant and having a nice time. We've been just sort of stuck here in this, I'll call it red tape, because that's really what it is. We're stuck in this middle, and we want to work with the city, and we want to accomplish putting together a nice restaurant, a safe restaurant. And we're open to ideas and doing what we can to accommodate that. But removing 10 to 15 seats, right off the bat, that's not right. That's just, we can't do that. It makes a marginal business, lose money. And that's not, nobody wants that. We need to get the tax revenue back going. Let's get this place open. I think we need to make a decision tonight. We push this off another few months, and I saw a TikTok post the other day. What's going on with Marin Joe's? And they're caught in a traffic study, and so we went out and hired a traffic engineer, and we didn't really think it was necessary, but we want to work with you and accomplish, get this place back open. So we're willing to work with you and find a solution. But God, it's a catch-22, and we're just stuck in this red tape. We need to get this place open and start cooking good food. And happy to answer any questions or have the traffic engineer, answer any questions, and let's get this resolved.
Thank you, Chris. I'm going to turn to the other commissioners here and see if, after hearing both of you, that anyone has any questions for you guys continuing after this. So, Valerie, do you have any questions for these gentlemen?
Sure. Thank you. Yes, thank you for the presentation. Thank you for laying out things that you're having a dilemma with. Obviously, we all see it here. I believe that these are just recommendations here in the session to review preliminary. I don't have an issue, obviously, for you guys to expand and maintain your number of seats. It's obviously the right thing to do because you do need to meet ADA standards. There's no questions of it, and I don't believe that anyone is asking you not to do that or reduce the number of seats. We understand the reason why you are doing so. I believe the most dilemma is what are you willing to do not to create additional traffic on streets. I understand that it's no different from what it was before, but no one is to saying that what was before was the right thing. Right. So that's kind of where we're at in this particular study. And I think we started laying out a few strategies of what you could do potentially to mitigate that issue in the future. Again, the traffic study that has been done is not being hasn't studied when the restaurant is open on demand hours. It's studied the traffic when the restaurant is closed. So I think that's where the concern is. So you're forecasting kind of based on the historical data almost. So I think like the questions that I have would be around that is that, how many employees do you typically foresee on your peak hours on Fridays and Saturdays?
Employees?
Yes.
12.
Oh, you're going to have
It's
12?
in the study. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, sorry, I probably missed that.
No,
So for these 12 employees, right, like what we are asking to do instead of just voluntary measures, but perhaps make it a mandatory measure is to see how these employees can get to work and where they can park. Perhaps you devote a parking spot that is carpool only for employees only that will not be taken by anyone else. The other strategy I believe I voiced out is that you make a partnership with the adjacent properties that are operating in the normal daily business hours, and then you can take their parking spots after hours. That's something that you could do to mitigate those dilemmas. And then I believe in your parking diagram there, you have shown the stacked parking, but I was wondering if you have any protocols in place that in case of the emergency, because that specific area obviously is adjacent to our sensitive areas that could be, fire prone because there's like some wild areas there. How would you treat that area whenever you have a valet parking and you have stacked car situation in the peak hours? How would you address that in emergencies? Do you have any protocols around that?
Are you asking about emergencies at the facility or?
At the parking, so where
if
they
a
park,
fire team pulls in, they still maintain clearance.
but there is a fire lane of some sort.
Yeah, I believe that even.
It's not what I've seen in the parking diagram, but
Well, in the parking diagram, there's a way out, and whether they're stacked or not, they're right. You just have to be able to get off the lot.
Yeah, there's clearance for a vehicle to go through. It's not like they're stacked and blocking the exit.
They're not blocking the exit. They are not blocking the exit. They are parked behind other cars, but there is still greater than a 12-foot lane around the parallel cars. But nobody's in those cars that are stacked. Those cars can be left, and people can.
So if in case of the emergency, how do the patrons of the restaurant would get to their cars?
In case of an emergency, we're not going to save cars. We'll save people, not cars.
Okay. That
I don't think somebody needs a car. No, I don't. This is actually an interesting conversation. I don't know that people evacuate emergencies from their cars. Like,
sometimes they do, and I think that's what kind of the question that I had, if you have any protocols in place to
yeah, but
address that.
I mean, isn't that kind of true in any parking lot that you would have to get out of the parking lot? The lanes kept open. I don't know. It's a tough one to answer.
It's a tough one to answer, yeah.
We could put together a emergency protocol for valet I mean, valet parking and stacked valet parking is very common. And so I think that's a great point. We could put together an emergency protocol for valet parking.
Okay. Yeah, it would be
Totally amenable.
It would be
to it,
good
yeah.
to see that, because people do everyone acts differently in a panic mode, and I feel like having just clear policies would help to address that.
Sounds like a fantastic.
Yeah, that's just what I've seen from the parking diagram. That's all. But other than that, I have no further questions.
Okay. Mr. Kenny, do you have any questions for these gentlemen?
Yeah. In the staff report, there's 5 possible mitigation measures for the parking shortfall. Have you looked at those? And if so, do you have any comments on them, on their feasibility, on any financial costs they might present to you?
All 5 of the which 5? Is it 5? There's 5 that are sort of, there's 3 that are written in there, and then there's 5 suggestions. And I cannot speak to the, financial part of that. So I might let Chris speak to that. But any of those, it's hard for us to say like we'll do them all. It helps to know from your standpoint like which ones you would like to see us do. I think some of them seem harder to bank on. Like, I don't know that a Tesla dealership wants to limit the amount of Teslas they can, park on their lot and sell. So that might be a tough go. Our immediate neighbor is maybe a more sensitive population group that may not be open to lots of public use of their private space. So it's just hard to know what those negotiations would yield.
Yeah, it's a quarter mile probably from the nearest available parking lot to the restaurant, from Pete's Coffee or the library or the bank over there. It's a hike. Yeah.
But yeah. But from, I did hear that we're more than a half mile from bus stops instead, which there are 2 bus stops point.
So it's a half mile all the way.
It's
Yeah.
less than half a mile from us. So it is public transportation available.
There are no buses there.
What's that?
There are no buses there after hours.
They stop at 9 p.m. So, during much of the peak time, they're there.
So
And what else?
The beauty of Uber.
Staff, you want to finish this first?
Go ahead and finish with these gentlemen. Yeah.
I'm done with him.
Okay, go ahead and ask staff quickly.
Yeah, so Amy, you referred to a parking plan. What typically is in the parking plan? And it would be useful when this comes before us for a vote, if that plan were done and we could review it.
I agree. And I will say we really, they just applied the further amendment about 2 weeks ago. So we did not ask for that parking plan knowing where they were at in the process. But I would think that, and the Chris's can comment, but the parking plan to what we would be looking for is actually very similar to what their valet plan looks like of what is their plan for parking during peak hours? How would they be able to maximize the parking spaces? And then having some plan for what happens when those parking places are exceeded or people aren't able to get to the restaurant, in situations where there's just too much happening. Like, what are the protocols in those situations? What would the restaurant staff do? So I think that's really what we would be looking for, but perhaps you've already thought about what you're going to propose for that parking plan.
For what we would propose for that parking plan for when,
The original entitlement, there was the parking plan requirement, which you may have not thought of yet, but it is required before building permit issuance.
oh no, we've thought of it, which is, so the parking plan we submitted shows how we would park vehicles in a valet scenario, which adds 16 spots to the 46. So that bolsters our, because it's really just Friday night, right? Like during the week, the projected parking load on us is within what we have on site. On Friday night, that rises to 80. And so the task was, let's see how much we can take on site to alleviate the street on street parking. And so we added 16 spots for valet. I believe it's sort of Friday through Sunday or Thursday through Saturday. And then we also added an overlay of like, we'll have employees park, not use our on-site parking. So there's another, whether it's 12 spots for 12 employees or the I think it's 1 spot per 3 employees but again, we're starting to get into towards 60 spots. And then we propose to well, anyway, and then when we took an inventory of, I know that we can't count the on-street parking, but people are going to park on street whether we choose for them to or not, because it's more accessible. When you drive up to that restaurant, a certain number of people are just going to park on the street. So I think, we feel confident that we also, we're talking about safety, and I can let the traffic engineer speak to this, but we did pull safety reports from the California Highway Patrol of that area and look to see how many accidents happen around there, because supposedly, I'm not questioning this, but that there's a sort of traffic pinch point there. And the safety data has shown that it's less dangerous than average. So it's a reasonably safe area, given the existing sort of parking scenario historically with the restaurant there. And then recently there's been street upgrades to make it even safer. So I think a lot's been sort of being approached to make for a safe a safe situation in the area.
So I'm not clear. So they have produced a parking plan.
Yeah, they had it on screen.
Not a formal parking
Not a
plan,
formal one, but there was a parking.
but that is the semblance of what I think we would get as far as a parking plan, is how to maximize the parking situation on site.
Oh, and one more thing on that parking plan is we added class 1 and class 2 bicycle spaces. So many of the employees currently ride bikes and put bikes behind the restaurant, but we're formalizing it with bike racks under a covering for long-term bike storage for employees, as well as bike racks at the front of the restaurant. There's an area of the parking lot that can support 6 bicycles for short-term parking. And so if I walk up to the screen, so there's class 2 bike parking happening here, and there's class 1 and long like in front of that.
Between class 1 and class 2 bikes, I mean. Well,
And may I let the traffic, and I'm
please.
less an expert at traffic than our.
Okay. I
I'm Steve Abrams from Abrams Associates Traffic Engineering. Appreciate the opportunity to speak. I'll try to keep it short. I wanted to let you know that, normally a parking demand analysis can be useful in this situation. It turned out it wasn't very useful because just as an example, the rates that we have from the parking generation manual often show that the code is a little high for certain types of uses, such as retail and office, and we can sometimes present data that shows that, no, the demand would be less. Unfortunately, with restaurants, the code is fairly accurate. We can show that the requirements be less during the week, but on weekend evenings, the demand from all our surveys in the parking generation manual essentially confirmed it'd be similar to the code requirements. So we weren't able to really help. Went through the analysis in case we were able to show that the demand would be less, but as you might expect and from previous experience, we know it's not. I wanted to respond with respect to the parking surveys. Obviously we can only survey it now with nothing open. And the reason we did that is to get an idea if there would be available on-street parking to accommodate the overflow. And we did not find it 69% full. It was only 69% full in the area right in front of the apartments next to it. In the other direction, it was 3% full. I mean, it's basically empty now that Marin Joe's is closed. And we identified just within about 750 feet, only about 0.15 miles, there was at least 40 open spaces in the worst case scenario during our surveys on a Friday evening. We surveyed Friday and Saturday evenings. So, and it's as you described, the other businesses are closed when this is at a peak. So actually further down, towards Tesla, there's tons of on-street parking in the evening on Fridays and Saturday nights because all the other businesses are closed. So we did, identify that on-street parking is essentially available. Trip generation for a restaurant is calculated by the number of seats. So theoretically, there'd be no increase in traffic with this project. And there are rates per square foot, but it'd be a negligible increase for just 100 square feet. So essentially, you can assume there's no significant change in traffic associated with this project. With respect to safety, I think it's, it's reasonable to assume that Marin Joe's customers wouldn't be any less safe drivers than anyone else. People park along there, and the accident records, even going back to when Marin Joe's was open, show very few accidents. There's really no safety problem we identified out there. And by definition, if the city is allowing parking, you have to assume it's safe. I mean, people making three-point turns, essentially that would, if there was an accident caused by someone parking there, it would have to be preceded by an unsafe maneuver. And it's not a liability issue for the restaurant or the city. It's the driver who's responsible for not making a three-point turn if he doesn't have sufficient visibility or if there's oncoming traffic. So otherwise, it's assumed folks who aren't comfortable or aren't able to make a three-point turn safely would have to go down and turn around somewhere else. But what's really important to note here is just whatever land use went on this site, people are going to park on the street, and a lot of them. I can tell you, I do a lot of parking studies for apartment complexes, and it's amazing. You could provide more than enough parking, and people just park on the street out in front of it, no matter what. So any land use on this site, folks are going to park on the street. Like if you build apartments there, guaranteed there'd be, apartment folks park just like the housing that's next to it. That's where the cars are parked, kind of right in front of the adjacent apartments. So those are just a few thoughts I wanted to pass along, but I'm available for questions, but that's about it for now.
Thank you. Well stated. Any questions for this gentleman? No. Okay. You have any questions further at
I
this
have
point?
opinions, but no questions.
Okay, no questions. You can't have opinions. All right. So I'm going to just go back to those 5 points that Dan was asking about that are in the staff report here. Provide transportation subsidies or reimbursements for employees. Offer stipends or rewards for employees who use other modes of transportation. Encourage employee carpooling or rideshare incentives. Identify temporary parking for delivery service vehicles. Promote online ordering and pickup scheduling. And fifth was provide customer rideshare discounts for dining on Fridays and Saturdays. So these are elements that you put into the staff report as possible strategies for this work, right? You guys see all those. So, and I think staff is asking for any further ideas that we have that they would take back to the applicant and then turn into part of the process when it comes back before us. Is that fair to say? That, okay. I think that it seems that expediting this is quite important to the commercial value of this property and to the area. It seems that we want to do that as quickly as possible. So I appreciate what staff has done to get this before us and hopefully get some steps, because your hands are tied. You really have to do it this way. There's no way around it at this point in time. And you're trying to find some flexibility in the next code update to give more options available to you to move this along at a better clip. So we have to ask for public opinion at this point. Is there anybody online that has a hand raised or anything for this option?
No hands online, Churchies, and no
Thank you.
emails.
So we have those 5 items, and I think Valerie has brought up some other things or questions about making them mandatory. I think that that could be a part of what staff could propose or ask the applicant to put in as a mandatory requirement. They are going to come back with a parking plan that's a better embellishment of what they presented to us tonight. Is there anything else that you guys would want to add to this?
One thing, it might be useful to do a little research on these 5 mitigation measures, assuming that's the full list in terms of what happens in other towns, the success rate of these things or restaurants in other towns perhaps, or maybe there's some online research data, because some are more feasible than others. And, if we're going to save 2 parking spaces by making them spend a lot of money to mitigate something, then, what's the balance? So I'd like to see some better data on the success of these measures, so we'd have some sense of how effective they might be.
That's a good point, Dan. Why spend a lot of money over little result? Yeah. And I don't know, there's so little transit unless it's coming down 101 and then they walk over to the restaurant for employees. These are things that you guys might have a better handle on or know. The traffic guy might have some idea of whether these things actually have an effect on employees' behavior. Never mind the customers, right? So anything else?
No, I was just going to ask, may I suggest asking for an employee survey? We can do like the employee occupancy survey and just to see what people actually do use. And that can be provided with the review. And then out of these 5, maybe 3 measures could work per the employee survey. And this is what the applicant can say, okay, these 3 measures can work for them, and this is what we will provide.
So in a way, instead of doing it in a vacuum, asking employees also what they would sign up for.
Correct.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. That might be as effective as anything. But then making it mandatory, who knows, maybe they say, no, okay, I'll work someplace else. I have no idea, right? Andy, do you have any other thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with the 3 suggestions, and then I have a tough time making any of those requirements. However, I'm a little concerned about overreach, I guess. That's my perspective. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I think the 3 ideas and then the 5 additional ideas that were suggested are wonderful. I have a tough time making any of them mandatory myself. I think there would be great difficulties in enforcing them. And I also think that it might be too much staff time invested in that. I happen to think that I'm concerned about overreach, I guess, here on the part of the planning department and on the part of the planning commission, because the one thing I think we should be concerned about is safety. And Valerie brought up the point of like bicyclists coming down Casa Buena, the fact that people are backing out of those diagonal spaces. That personally is what concerns me. But the fact of the matter is, it's a restaurant that's operated for quite a number of years, and there's a finite number of spaces. I do agree that the on-street parking is relevant. I think a lot of people are going to park there, especially given the point that was made that a lot of those nearby retail uses are primarily in the daytime. I also think that if there's a parking shortage at the restaurant, that the market is going to play into that a bit. In other words, some patrons won't go there because they can't find a place to park. I think that that's going to be a limiting factor, and that we don't need to make too many mandates in this situation. That's my opinion.
That's a good point, Andrew. I think that the owner, Chris, would want to make this as effective as possible. So that's up to him to make these work well. So anything else that we want to impart from you guys to this besides these 5 statements, and let the traffic study show, or parking plan show what it has to show? Yeah. Okay. So with all of that said, you've got a vote that says those things are valid and useful, and we encourage you to look at them, but also evaluate whether they're going to have an impact on the ultimate outcome of this effort. Yeah. So I wish that we had something more we could, opine on, but we shouldn't and couldn't. So I think there you have it. I do know that I sorely miss going to Marin Joe's. So, we got to get that thing back open. So that's certainty.
Great. Thank you very much. Really appreciate all your comments and your thoughtfulness on this one.
Okay.
I just have
Okay, thank you.
I just want to say that I appreciate, Amy, that you and staff are trying to expedite this, because I completely understand the frustration of the owner in this situation. And I've spent more of my time on that side than here. So I get it. So thank you.
All right, Chris, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
All right. That's it. All right. Should we end this item? And you guys would be released then.
One question,
Okay,
Peter.
go
Do we
ahead.
need to provide any feedback about the 3-foot addition?
I don't know that we do. This is about the parking, but go ahead, Amy. Yeah.
As far as a design component, or
Just whether we have any concerns about it. I know we're not voting, but
yeah, that would be fine.
well, then I'll offer that. Given the constraints of this site, it's amazing a building actually ended up here to begin with. But I have no problem with adding the 3 feet when it comes to that
Yeah.
later.
Yeah. Thank you. Valerie, do you have anything to say about that?
No, I think it shows a way to go about it for sure.
Agreed.
Okay. Yeah. We're talking about this kind of like that's a fait accompli, that they need that footage inside, and the restaurant needs to exist in that format. Yeah. So those booths cannot be reduced.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I did something with my agenda. There it is.
I just know you're taking time out of all of them.
Of course. All right, then. We're going to go on to commissioner reports. It is now 9:00. Let's continue and get this stuff done. So who has the report on the last meetings of the town council?
I believe that I was supposed to, but I confess I missed the meeting, and then I went online to check in on the video that was available, and unfortunately, I realized that I chose the wrong date. So I don't have anything to report, and I'm sorry. It's my fault.
Fine, how do you do?
Date was that you?
Well, I was trying to do March 3rd or 4th,
Okay.
but it somehow ended up on February 18th, and it's my screw up. So
Let's see, I can report out on that. Let me open the agenda. I'm testing our wireless here. There we go. Okay, Tuesday, March 3rd. Oh, this is our most recent one. So we actually had a presentation from Jillian Zeiger, who's she's a principal planner with the County of Marin, and she actually leads our housing working group. And she really presented on our collaboration through the housing working group and some of the efforts that the group has undertaken and just some of the projects that will be happening in the future. So this is collectively all the jurisdictions working together, and it's how a lot of the supportive studies happened for the housing element. And now we're really focused on implementation of the housing elements and looking for areas of collective work. And so that was a good presentation and discussion. And then the public hearings, the primary public hearing was about the tobacco ordinance. So our assistant town manager presented an introduction of an ordinance to establish minimum pricing. And this is based on a model ordinance from the County of Marin. And there was a lot of public comment. There's a very active group from Redwood High that is they actually want tobacco to be banned. And so there's a lot of comments around banning tobacco. So the council introduced an ordinance around the minimum pricing, including one amendment to ban nicotine pouches, which is something that Fairfax had done. And then they also vocalized that they would be interested in pursuing or exploring what a full ban would look like. So that will have to come back to the council for that item. And then the other item was related to Soma Aquatics and being able to use Redwood High's pool for free summer swim programs. And the council approved that item. And that's about it that happened at the March 3rd meeting.
Okay, thank you, Amy. But there was another meeting that occurred between our last canceled meeting and that meeting, right? There was another council meeting somewhere in there.
February 17th meeting. Perhaps that was
Yeah.
Margaret's.
Okay.
I can
I
open that.
thought Margaret reported on that one last.
We skipped our last meeting last month, so
Oh, maybe that's a new one.
yeah.
She reported on that.
I took a few notes on the February 17th meeting.
Oh, okay.
I think that's when the storm pump station repairs were discussed.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
Fire away.
And then there was a lot of time spent on the 2026 Town Council Staff Work Plan.
Yes. Correct.
And then the part I found most interesting had to do with whether the building permit fees should be eliminated for projects that were repairing damages from the floods. And Amy, obviously you were there and weighed in on that.
Mm-hmm.
But as it turns out, there was apparently only two projects that came in that would have qualified for that permit fee exemption. So I don't think it went any further than that.
Correct.
So,
Yep, we didn't recommend any permit reductions for the flood-related activity.
I'm surprised only two permit applications came in for that. I guess there might be more, right? But,
Yeah, I think we did have a survey out looking for damage assessments. And so there was more damage beyond those two permits, obviously.
right.
But a lot of people just chose not to get permits, which happens and is common.
And maybe there's insurance claims or insurance money that has to be dealt with before they apply for the permits, right? I don't know.
Yeah, it's a process.
Does that include Big Five?
No, we haven't received anything from Big Five. We have received some inquiries for new businesses that want to be there. So we're guessing that Big Five is not planning to reopen, but I haven't talked to the property owner directly.
Right, okay. And on the work plan, the word is just overloaded.
Yeah, there wasn't a big impact to the work plan for planning at that meeting. But there were some additional items added for other departments. There's a lot of discussion around vegetation management. So I think at our next council meeting, our fire chief will be doing a presentation on vegetation management efforts. There's a lot of discussion about some items within the Park and Rec section of the work plan and the mural at the community center, and some other items related to that part of the work plan.
Okay. Well, do you have anything else you want to add to commentary for tonight?
No, I don't think so. You
Right.
mean as far as reports or just?
Yes, as far as reports, yeah.
So just a couple things. One, that three of you are up for reappointment, and our hope is that you all reapply for your reappointment. And so that window will be open for, I think, a couple, maybe a month, another month or so. There's a lot of boards and commission vacancies that are being recruited for. But there is a new policy on reappointments that you won't have to interview if your seat is uncontested. So if you apply and there's not more people applying than what we have available, then there won't be an interview requirement, but your reappointment would just move forward to the council. And then just another informational piece that we do have a request for proposal out right now to seek a consultant to help us write an economic strategic plan. So this is something that is in our work plan, and it is a long range document and that will intersect with planning. And so you all will be involved as that moves forward. But we are right now just looking for a consultant to help us work on that effort. And that's all I have.
Oh, thank you. That's great. So the only other item on our agenda tonight is to look at the minutes for two meetings. That would be December 9th and February 10th. So in those notes, does anybody have any comment for December 9th? No. Okay. And does anybody have any comments for February 10th? No. Okay.
The date is wrong at the top of those minutes. I'm sorry to interrupt you. It says February 10th, 2025, so I will make that edit.
Oh, Tracy, how could you? All right. So that said, we can voice vote to approve these minutes, December 9th, February 10th. Do we have a motion to approve these?
I move that we approve the minutes from
Okay,
those two dates.
great. And I think we're all going to say yes, so we can all say approve, yes. Let the record show that they're approved, huh?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Not quite kosher. Okay, so second, second on the motion, so then we'll say all together, 1, 2, 3.
Yes.
Yay, okay. Got it, okay. Well, that said, let's adjourn this meeting. Thank you.